Hello everyone, welcome back. So last episode we made it where we can optionally go and just make a character speak directly by referencing the character class that was created for them. This is good, as I've said, for external use cases where you might not be using dialogue files but still want characters to speak on screen and have an easy way of calling that from inside a coroutine or anything else. Now this video, we're going to be focusing on putting our configurations to use and getting the customized colors and fonts and whatever else applied to screen for each particular character when they start speaking. We've already got most everything set up, and we're just going to need to add a little bit of logic to some of the scripts that we've got, including our dialogue system and our character class. So let's go ahead and get started on that. Now, in our dialogue system, we've got a function set up where we are showing a speaker name, and this is just changing the text that's on screen to show the name text to be whatever character is speaking. That way we can see easily who's talking at any given time. But this isn't applying any sort of configuration data, just the name of the character. So let's make another function up here. And so we'll make this public and call this apply speaker data to dialogue container. This is simply going to take a string for the speaker name, and we're going to get whatever character is known by this name within the character manager. Now, we have a way of creating characters, but we didn't make a way to retrieve characters yet. So let's go back to the character manager, and in addition to create character, let's make a public character return type for get character. This will have a string for the character name, and we'll also do a boolean for if we don't find a character within the characters list or dictionary, then maybe we want to create one if they don't already exist, or maybe we don't. So we'll specify that here with create if does not exist, and just default that to false. So we'll do a quick check. So if characters dot contains key character name, again, remember we have to convert that to lowercase, so it's case insensitive. So if we do, then let's go ahead and return character name to lower, and that'll give us the character that was created for this character name. Otherwise, if create if does not exist, then we want to return create character and pass in the character name. If that's not true, then we're going to return null because we did not find a match and we do not want to create the character if it doesn't exist. And that means now we can go ahead and grab our character. So we'll say character equals the character manager dot instance dot get character by whatever speaker name we have passed in. And we'll leave create if doesn't exist at false. That way it does not try to create the character. We only want to retrieve them if they're in the scene. And now we need to get the configuration that is assigned to this character. But if we look at the character class, we don't actually have a configuration assigned to them. So let's go ahead and fix that. Let's say public character config data, config, is going to be stored inside this character. We're going to tack that on to this constructor. We'll add that as another parameter, and then assign this .config to equal whatever is passed in. Now that's, again, going to change our character text because now it's not matching the base type. So let's go ahead and add the same thing here of character config data, config, and then throw that into the base. Of course, this means doing the same thing for our other types. So character config data, config, and throwing that into base, then to model 3D, and live 2D as well. Might be a little tedious, but we don't have too many character types, so not a big deal. So with this now expected as a parameter along with our name, we can assign a configuration to each character. That just means we need to go back into our character manager, and when we create these characters, we also need to pass in the configuration. So at this point, any character that's created has both their name and the configuration customizable attributes that make them unique in their own way. And that means in our dialogue system, when we're trying to apply this data, after we try to get the character, we can also try to get whatever config may be associated to them. So let's say character config data, config equals whatever may be for this character. First of all, we need to evaluate if we actually found a character. So let's check if character is not equal to null. If there is a character that's being created, then they'll have their own configuration already assigned to them. And we can just say character config, or character.config rather, will be our return type. We'll get the value that is directly assigned to the character that was created. Now, if we don't have a character in the scene, we need to go ahead and try just to get some sort of default configuration for that character if they're configured within the character configuration asset. And if they're not, then we'll just get the default value. And that's something that we've already set up if we access the character configuration asset getConfig function. Now, currently, we don't have that. We'd have to go through the character manager config. So let's actually make a return value from our character manager that'll do this automatically for us. Let's just make this public character config data called getCharacterConfig, taking a string speaker name or keep consistent character name. And in here, we're going to return config.getConfig with the character name. And what this does, of course, is it tries to find them within the list of configured characters. If it finds them, return the copy of the data or return the default. So no matter what happens when we're trying to apply the speaker data for this character, we're going to get some kind of valid configuration. As long as we set this to character manager .instance.get character config with our speaker name. So that'll get us our configuration, and now we just need to do something with it. This is going to require us setting the color and the font of both the name container and the dialog container. So let's go to those real quick and make that possible for us. Our dialog container is right here, so if we enter there, we've already got public access to these variables, which includes our dialog text, but for simplicity and for just ease of use and ease of reading, let's go ahead and make two functions that'll set the color and set the font of the dialog text. So public void set dialog color with a color called color. This is just a one-liner, which will make dialog text.color equal whatever we pass in. Let's make another void called set dialog font. Ooh, I misspelled color there. And pass in a TMP font asset called font. Again, another one-liner, which will set our dialog text font to equal whatever we pass in. Now, let's equally do the same thing for the name container. We've got show and hide here, so let's just add set the color, do set name color, and then set name font, and we'll change dialog text to name text. After that, we're now free to set the colors. So we'll say dialog container dot set dialog color to config dot dialog color, and then dialog container dot set the dialog font to config dot dialog font. We'll do the same thing for the name text, which would be dialog container dot name container dot set name color to config dot name color, and lastly for the font, so set name font to config name font. So when we call this function, we'll see if there's a character in the screen, and we'll try to get the configuration that's assigned to this particular character, and then just apply all of that to our dialog container. Which means, let's go back to our character class, and back into our save function, we're showing the speaker name, and now we need to customize the speaker data. Customize the dialog system's dialog container and name container with the color and the font, and whatever else you may have added. So we'll say dialog system dot apply speaker data to dialog container, and we can pass in the name of the character. Now, the way that's set up is perfect if we don't already have a configuration. So if we're running this from a dialog file and we may not have an instance to the character already, we could look them up by name, which is what this is doing. But why don't we also make another variant of that, which will go ahead and take a direct reference to a config file, that way we don't have to go through a whole search. And instead of a string, we'll take a character config data for the config, and we'll take these lines, put them in here, and then in the place of those lines, we'll call apply config. So if we don't have the config already, we can call them by name and retrieve it. If we do, then we just pass it in directly. And for our character then, to save a little processing, we'll instead change name directly to our config. And this should go ahead and set the name, set the configuration customizations, and start talking. So in test characters, we've got all these lines that are going to run, as well as the characters who are going to be speaking them. Now, Ellen is configured, Adam is not, neither is Sarah, but let's go ahead and set Sarah, change her to Ben, and call him Benjamin, because that's the character who has another customization. Change Sarah to Ben, and then let's look at what happens. Again, if we look at our character configuration asset, we can see that Ellen has a pink color that should show for her name, orange for her dialogue, and Benjamin has his own colors as well. So if we start that, let's see if it does indeed apply those. Okay, so for Ellen, we get the colors. Looks good. Not as ugly as I thought it would be. And then Adam, okay, since he didn't have a configuration, he got the default configuration. So that is working. And then Benjamin should have his. Yes, indeed he does. Looks good. Now that's great if we have a direct reference, but let's just make sure that our retrievals are working as well by providing the string instead. So that way it has to look up the character and try to find the configuration. And looking them up by string, it's able to find them from the character manager and get the proper config anyway. So we know that all of that is working, and it is doing well. But the only thing we're not changing is the default font. So right here, I have a list of a whole bunch of different font assets. And these are not just Windows fonts, these are TextMesh Pro fonts. They were created from Windows fonts, and the process is pretty straightforward. But I'm just going to import these, and I'll provide these as a resource for download, so that way you can do the same. The place that we're going to put these is inside of resources, because later on, we may be able to, or we may want to change the font directly from a dialog file, which means we'll need to load them from resources. So we'll need to place them in here. But to clean this out, I'm going to move these, since these are just testing files, I'm going to move them into testing and make a new folder called resources. And inside of resources, I'll make another folder called dialog files. The neat thing about resources is it doesn't matter where it is in your project. You'll notice I have two resources folders now. One inside of the main folder, which has all the assets for this main project, and one's inside of testing, which will be deleted before I build the game. So we can just drag these right into the testing resources inside of that dialog files folder, and they will load just fine. So it doesn't matter what resources folder you have or where they are. If you try to reference and load something from resources, it's going to look in each folder that's called resources. So that's pretty handy, and that's perfect for separating testing files from actual files that we'll be using in the project. So in the main resources, I'll create a new folder and call this fonts. Inside of fonts, I'm going to import all of these assets directly in here. There we go, and now I've got all these fonts ready and available. If I look into dialog in the root container and just apply one of these to the dialog text for a minute, we can see how we have all these different appearances, and this can be used to customize the way our characters speak. That's real attractive. Okay, so we'll just head back to the default asset, but head into configuration folder, check out my character configurations file, and I'm going to set Ellen from name font to, I think I'll set her to Meteora for her name font, and for the dialogue font, I'm going to set her to, why not Winnie the Pooh? Why not? And Benjamin, he's going to have Morpheus for his name, and we will do Rosito for his dialogue font. So now when we run this, we should get both new colors and new fonts for the characters. Sure enough, there we are. There's the new font. That's how Ellen appears, so she's all customized. Adam is default. He's using default font and color. And Benjamin is customized as well. So there we go. With that system in place, we are now able to define customizations for every character and have it all apply on screen to our dialogue and name text and give our characters unique looks. One thing before we go, let me go ahead and show you how to make a TM Pro font asset. It's super simple. If you want a new font, why don't you go into your C drive, go into your Windows folder, and look for your fonts folder. Inside of here, you have an absolutely hideous interface, but you have all these different fonts, and you can drag in the one that you want to import. Courier looks nice, but I've already got one that's pretty similar to that, so what I'm going to grab instead is one that looks really... Okay, how about this? Harlow Solid. That looks different. So let's drag that into our Unity project, and here it is. Here's Harlow's. So if we right-click that, actually first, if you look at dialog text and we try to drag that in, it's not going to work because it's not the right type. We need to convert it. So right-click, create, go to Text Mesh Pro. Where are you? Where? Right in front of my face. There we are. And just choose to create a font asset. And boom, there we are. Harlow's right there. So if I take dialog and drag in Harlow's, there we go. Now we've got a very new appearance. Super easy. Can't be any simpler than that. And we can just delete the original text because we're not going to use that. But there we go. That's all there is to the customization system right now. And I'm not going to be taking that much further because I want to focus on different parts of the visual novel system. And the next one we're going to focus on is we're actually going to customize the configuration for the character after it's already been created and make sure that we can just change things on the fly if we want to. That's going to be the next video. So I'll see you then.